The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Qasim Shah. I represent Mix Telematics. I just wanted to get a few housekeeping rules out of the way before we begin our webinar. We have a very exciting lineup of speakers to take you through using in-vehicle technology to improve driver safety. Basically, what's going to happen is we're going to start off with Thomas Edelman. He's going to kick it off in terms of discussing the road safety. Brody Vonberg is going to represent Mix Telematics and take you through his presentation, followed by Cormac Gilligan, and then finally Ashok Kulkarni. Each presentation, it will take 10 minutes. They will take you through a series of slides. For any question that you have, please raise your hand and type out your questions. If they are relevant to the topic that they're discussing currently, they will be answered right there and then. But we do have a 20-minute question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please save them until then, and then we will open it up to a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So what I will do is I will hand it off to Thomas Edelman from RoadSafety UAE to begin the webinar. Thomas?
All right. Thanks a lot, Qasim. This is Thomas Edelman from RoadSafety UAE. Good afternoon to everybody. As Qasim already said, I just wanted to give a little bit an overview and a background of this initiative of this afternoon. So basically, Mix Telematics is one of our supporters, and Mix Telematics is running a series of webinars all over the world. Unfortunately, very often in different time zones. I was very intrigued by one webinar that happened recently in Australia, but from a timing perspective, it was nearly impossible for us to attend. That's the reason why Brody, Qasim, and myself came up with the idea of having a webinar in our time zone, and also with the contribution of local representatives. In this specific case, this is Ashok from Shell and Cormac from Pepsi, in addition, of course, to Brody from Mix Telematics. Now, the next slide, please. So some of you might know me and might know what we are doing. We are called RoadSafety UAE. We are looking after raising awareness for road safety in the UAE, and we are coming from a very strong communication and activation angle. And this event of this afternoon falls typically under one of these activation initiatives that we are doing together with our supporters. Next slide, please. To provide a high-level background, in the UAE there is the Vision 2021, which means by the year 2021 the nation will turn 50 years. And the UAE government came forward with something like a business plan for the region, where they are highlighting a lot of improvement areas, and one of these improvement areas is road safety. Very clearly the government says we need to see traction there, we need to see improvement, and the KPI they are using is the fatality rate per 100,000, and this needs to be cut dramatically from about 6 point something down to 3 by 2021. This is only 5 years away, and we as a nation are challenged to support the government. In this specific case, we have a lot of responsibility also taken by our partners, for example, by Mix Telematics, who also say, okay, they and their solutions together with fleet operators, with big corporations can definitely also help the government to achieve their objectives. Next slide, please. What we at RoadSafety UAE are doing in order to fulfill our mission, which is to raise awareness for road safety, we are working very closely with the individual traffic participants. So this is basically you and me driving on the roads. We're doing that a lot via social media activation, for example, and other media activation. We're working very closely with the authorities. Like this morning I had a breakfast meeting with Abu Dhabi Police, for example. We are also working with RTA, Department of Transportation, Ministry of Interior, and so on. We are all working very closely with media, so basically with all the leading media who support our cause very, very strongly, and then with corporations, again, like Mix Telematics or Pepsi. We are very, very happy to have about 30 corporates supporting us right now. Next slide, please. And here they are. So you see companies from various backgrounds and various industries, automotive companies. We have MAN as a truck company. We have construction companies. We have insurance companies, the biggest petrol station in the country, and they're basically all supporting our cause. Next slide, please. When we work with our supporters, we invite them to adopt a topic of road safety. And we have two examples here. On the left-hand side, you see what Mixed Telematics have been doing. So they basically co-created with us a topic that talks about the commercial land transport safety. So for all of you guys who haven't seen that, please log on to our portal, RoadSafetyUE.com, and go to the section about commercial land transport safety, which is, I think, of big relevance to most of you. And in there, there's a lot of very, very relevant content. On the right-hand side, you see what we're doing with Pepsi. Pepsi as an organization is on a global level very, very committed to look after their staff. And this is the reason why they also decided to come on board and support the cause of road safety. Pepsi and Cormac, who will also talk a little bit later, adopted a topic that talks about one of the biggest killers on our roads, which is tailgating, or keeping the proper distance to the car in front of you. And also, when you log on and have a look at the tips and tricks that we are giving there, it's a lot of very, very relevant stuff that can protect all of us every day. Next slide, please. This is basically the last slide of this presentation. This also brings into context what we're doing today. It is not only that we want to attract supporters to come on board and adopt the topic, but it's also to bring the content really alive and to engage with the broader society. So this webinar of today is an excellent example. It falls under the, as we call it, touchpoint activations. In this specific case, we're talking to the external audience. So it's all about earning the label as a good citizen. And we have done a lot of initiatives with our various supporters for the time being. Consumer promotions, we have done staff promotions. We are engaging with the staff of our supporters regularly, and so on and so on and so on. Now, next slide, please. In this context, it's also very important to understand the contribution that the heavy vehicle industry can do in order to help the government achieve the Vision 2021. We are all, I think, quite well aware of what's going on the roads. There are a couple of examples here about truck accidents, about bus accidents, and the essence of this slide basically is we have to stick the heads together. We have to work as an industry to do whatever we can in order to improve the situation. And for sure, the technology that we're going to discuss this afternoon has the ability and has the power to influence things to the positive. Having said that, this brings us to the very last slide, which is just a big thank you to all of the participants and to the organizers. And I'm very much looking forward to the rest of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. And Brody, it's on over to you.
Fantastic. Is my audio okay there, Kasim?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you, Thomas, and for your efforts in terms of road safety in the UAE. They're very well. So, slide back to someone's a bit noisy. Okay. You've got the slides there, Kasim?
Yes, it's coming up now.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Excellent. So today I'm just going to be talking through what we call the mixed safe drive approach, which is our approach to commercial road safety. So first I just wanted to start with the simple question of why, and are we safe enough on the roads? The question is quite often asked in different contexts. When we're operating in the Middle East, we may feel that we're less safe, and then when we're operating perhaps in the UK, US or Australia, we may feel safer. But we can have a look at the figures and we can quantify the risk for ourselves. So if we can just go to the next slide, please, Kasim. Okay, so the World Health Organization publishes the Global Status Report on Road Safety, and what they provide for us is a breakdown year on year of the fatality rates and injuries from incidents on the roads. So I thought relevant today we'd quickly just look at the UAE, for example. The UAE reported road fatalities for 2013 was 651, and the World Health Organization estimated rate per 100,000 population is 10.9. Now, if we looked at that in comparison to the likes of Saudi, which is up in the high 20s, along with Oman, we're lower in terms of the GCC, but there is still probable that if our staff or our workers are out driving in the vehicles on the roads, it's probable that they will firstly be involved in an incident, and the severity may be high in terms of our workers or colleagues may be killed while we're operating on the roads. So some other interesting information which this tells us is the breakdown of deaths by road user. So we can see that a large proportion of the people killed were drivers of four-wheeled cars and light vehicles, making up 33%. So while we may have our office workers who simply drive light vehicles or four-wheel drives on the road, they are a high risk of being involved in a fatal crash, as opposed to if we look at drivers of passengers of heavier trucks, they're actually lower. So the perceptions may be different. Another important point to note here is fairly simplistic things like seatbelt compliance. It is still not law, when this was published, to have front and rear seatbelts for all occupants. Although it states the enforcement level is high at 10, for those of us that live or regularly visit the UAE will know that in fact it's quite common to see people driving without seatbelts, including infants and so on. So it's a little bit conflicting in terms of what it tells us. The other thing is the national speed limit law. It says here that the maximum speed limit is 120 and the enforcement is high at 10. But again, for people that live and work in the UAE will know that it's quite common that 140 or 139.9 is the standard speed limit, and the level of enforcement is very low, with only fixed cameras being the police mechanism. So there's just some interesting stats to put into perspective of road safety in the UAE and why it's important to us. Next slide, please, Kasim. Here's a historical graph which shows road traffic incidents over time. So we can see, going back from about the early 80s, that it has been declining in terms of the number of road traffic incidents per 100,000 population. So just in terms of macro trend, we can see it is improving. Next slide, please, Kasim. The next slide has the fatality rates per 100,000 population. Now, the data I obtained there was up until 1998, and I took the liberty of putting it up there to 2013, which has the current fatality rate of about 10.9. So again, we can see it's reducing, but it will be another 20 or 30 years at this rate until we see that rate getting close to zero. So in the interim, we need to do it. Next slide, please. So what is the mixed safe drive approach? We look at three factors. We look at the driver, the vehicle, and the road. When we're looking at the driver, if we just go to the next slide, please, Kasim. Okay, we can apply specific controls to aid us in making those drivers safer, as well as the vehicles and the road. There are a few, pardon me, I think Thomas just needs to be muted for a second if possible. There's a lot of noise. Okay, there are a couple of frameworks which are available to us to help manage our land transport activities in terms of risk and safety. The one example that I've provided here is the Oil Gas Producers Association for land transport safety, and they recommend 9 controls for making your fleet safer. Now these controls, some of them are quite dated. The last time this was updated was in 2005, but they are, however, very relative still today. If you just go to the next slide. Thanks, Kasim. Okay, so what I've highlighted here are the controls which could be used to improve the driver safety. So one is, are they wearing seat belts? And when we look at that in the context of telematics or in-vehicle monitoring systems, we have the ability with the technology today to monitor the seat belts and usage of seat belts by the occupants in the vehicle. The second one is driver training and qualification. Again, pardon me, through telematics systems, we're able to use the telematics system as a database to record the driver training and qualification records along with their expiry. And what we can do there is use that to highlight people who require retraining or recertification, and we can also then limit the access control to the vehicles should that training and qualifications have expired, therefore lowering the risk. In-vehicle monitoring systems also speak for themselves. The reason that we recommend the use of in-vehicle monitoring systems is that it allows us to quantify the risk of the driver performance. So we can produce very simplistic risk reports which will show the driver profile in terms of risk. We make them nice and simple to interpret in the fact that we use green, amber and red colouring, with red highlighting high-risk drivers, amber highlighting medium-risk drivers and green highlighting low-risk drivers. And that becomes a tool which enables managers to take proactive steps to reduce the risk for that driver through coaching and intervention to prevent a vehicle crash. The next item is distracted driving. Distracted driving, people who are driving in the vehicles today, they're faced with many distractions. The vehicle, the radio, their mobile phones, two-way radios, occupants of the vehicle, etc. So we can actually use telematics in terms of integrated video systems, etc., to monitor that compliance. 2.6 is driving under the influence of alcohol, drugs, narcotics. We also have technology solutions that enable us to mobilise the vehicle if the driver does not pass necessary tests. And 2.7, driver fitness and alertness. That is in reference to making sure the driver is fit for work, which may be a medical certificate. Again, we can manage that certificate validity in the database and provide alerts when it's expired. And then also looking at the amount of driving a driver has done in a certain period, and if they have driven more than a threshold that's allowed in terms of driving hours, maybe that's more than 2 hours at one time, more than 4 hours or 5 hours in a day, or maybe 30 hours in a week. We can manage that with telematics. Next slide, please. In terms of the vehicle, telematics can help us ensure that the vehicle is compliant and working correctly because we can monitor the seatbelt actions. The in-vehicle monitoring system will also help us maintain records such as servicing and licensing for the vehicle. So if the vehicle is not serviced, licensed or inspected according to the predefined intervals, then we can raise alerts and exceptions and notify the necessary people. 2.8 is vehicle specification and upfitting. Again, we're carrying maintenance and specification records for our vehicles in our database. We can select the appropriate vehicle to take on the journey, whether it needs to be a four-wheel drive, a heavy vehicle, or maybe it's going into an unsealed environment where it needs to be fitted with rollover protection. We can maintain all these details within the telematics system. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we come back to road. So we know we want to have a safe driver and a safe vehicle, and now we need to try and manage it and make sure that they're on a safe road. So journey management is a key function which enables us to plan the journey, look at the asset that's being used, the drivers, the passengers, the route that they're going to travel on, how long they're going to be driving for, are they going to be driving during daylight or nighttime, any additional load, and then we can risk rate every journey to ensure that the driver is planning to use the correct roads, and then most importantly, through execution management, we can check that they are actually driving according to the plan. Thank you. Next slide. And we'll just skip to the next one. Thanks, Cassie. Okay, so what do organisations really do? Well, we do find that in general, organisations are very compliant in terms of having vehicles with seatbelts and a seatbelt policy, and they do have IVMS or telematics installed, but they're not using the telematics system or the IVMS as a system to manage training and qualification records, to monitor distracted driving, to enable journey management, to monitor driver fitness and alertness in real time, to manage the vehicle specifications, and do that. The key driver behind that is what we call a road safety management system, which is a comprehensive system that enables our customers to manage road safety in terms of the policies and processes to manage each of those items. And last slide. Okay, so in terms of importance, we do tend to start at the road safety management system to make sure the policies and processes are documented and defined. But then we move to the driver to make sure we assess them and train them as required. Then we focus on driver compliance in terms of maintaining licensing, defensive driver training and other certifications. Then we ensure the vehicle is fit for purpose, whether we're buying the correct vehicle and whether it's maintained and in good working order. And the fifth one is journey management to ensure that all our other controls are risk rated for effectiveness at the time of the journey. I provided two references which will be shared on the slides afterwards. One is OGP 365, which we discussed during this webinar, and the second is ISO 39001, which is also a very good framework for implementing a road safety management system in your company, and also provides reference in terms of telematics. Thank you.
Thank you, Brody. And Cormac, I believe I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Great, thanks, Kasim. The audio okay?
Yes, it's perfectly fine.
Okay, great. You can move off this first slide. So just to build on what Brody was talking about, you know, the broader aspects of the fleet safety, road safety program, safe driving programs. I'm going to go a little bit further into how we've integrated technology with those broader elements of a safe driver program around route selection, maintenance of vehicles, you know, and so on. I'm going to focus more on the driver, because as Thomas started out on this call for us in PepsiCo, protecting our people is a core value for us. It's not a priority for PepsiCo. It's a value. It's beyond being a priority, and that's underpinned by our performance with purpose commitment. So right across the organization, we talk about performance with purpose as, you know, doing well, but also making sure doing well as a business, but also making sure we're contributing, we're giving back to the environment, the communities that we're based in. And the second part of it obviously is underpinned by our environmental health and safety policy at a global level, at a CEO level. So Kasim, if you go to the next slide. And you can just, this is an animated slide, so if you just animate it all the way around, there are eight elements to our overall fleet safety program for PepsiCo in Asia, Middle East, and North Africa. Kasim, if you just hit the next button for five or six times, you'll just populate the whole slide for us, so we can move a bit quicker. The first part of the program for us is driver selection. Making sure we're bringing people into the business who have a background and have capability in terms of driving. Once we understand that they have a minimum capability, then we build in our defensive driver training programs. And then once they're on the road, our driver behavior monitoring program kicks in. This is where we have the opportunity to take in relatively good drivers, train them up with the defensive driver training program, monitor their behavior once they're on the road, and that's fundamental for us, because the challenge we have effectively is to modify driver behavior. And the driver vehicle behavior monitoring technology that we use, that we've partnered closely with Mix on, enables us to really challenge those behaviors and change those behaviors. I mean, we all know how our own behaviors change once we get behind the wheel of a car or our own private vehicles. So the challenge we have in an environment like ours, where we've got a lot of trucks and vans on the road, is how do we modify those drivers' behaviors? And you couple that challenge with the road safety culture we have in MENA. You know, and Brody shared some of the stats that are there a moment ago. But it's a really big challenge. So driver behavior monitoring was a core part of this for us. We also instigated what we called unannounced road audits, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, as well as at the bottom of the slide, driver complaints hot numbers. So we all know in the UAE you see those signs in the back of vans and buses that say, call this number if my driving's not safe, and you call the number, and you know, if you watch carefully, you most likely see the guy who's actually driving the vehicle answer his mobile phone. So we wanted to make sure we had a mechanism for our consumers and our members of the public who see our drivers and see our vans out there selling our products. If they had a complaint or concern, that they had an actual way of reaching us. So that was part of our program. Behind the wheel coaching was key. And the real deal breaker for us in this program was our reward and penalization program, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. And then, you know, these programs are only as good as the data you get out of them. So really having valuable, value-added KPIs for the business was an important part of it. So on one slide, that's our full program. So I'll touch real quickly on each element. Kasim, if you go to the next slide for me. So the driver selection piece is obviously really key. And historically in the past, we would have just advertised for drivers and taken anybody's word at face value that they could drive and so on. And so what we started to do was identify that basic capability for driving wasn't really up to the standard that we wanted. So we use driver simulators to pre-select and pre-recruit people that we're going to give the keys of our vehicles to. And that pre-recruitment, pre-selection using our driver simulators has really helped us increase the quality and competency of the drivers that we bring in-house. So if you score less than 50% on the simulator, you won't be allowed to progress into your application for employment with us. So Kasim, you can go to the next slide. So the simulator is a really useful tool for us because it allows us really assess, as I said, these new drivers. But it also helps us to kind of keep our drivers current and fresh on skills. And it's interesting to see the progression of their skills when they start first as a pre-recruitment selection in the simulator, and then they go and they get their defensive driver training program and their coaching that goes with that. When they come back into the simulator, the quality of their driving has substantially increased. And this has been a real insight for us in terms of making people aware, changing the mindset of what they should be watching for and how to behave when you're behind the wheel of a vehicle. You can go to the next slide, Kasim. So the second element of beyond, so we do our selection with the simulators. The second part of it then is before we put them out on the road, they need to go through our defensive driver training programs. And we've adopted what's called a Smith system. Smith is a company that was based in the US that are one of our organizations, PepsiCo companies in the United States, Frito-Lay, had used and continue to use. And so we really liked the program they had, and we established a relationship with Smith. And so now they deliver all of our behind-the-wheel instruction for us across the Middle East and North Africa. So there's 5 keys to Smith. I'm not going to go through those, but basically they're the key principles of how to drive defensively. And they're applicable anywhere. You know, we got a lot of feedback initially from our drivers saying, oh, you know, this won't work in the Middle East. We can't drive like this in Egypt. If you give yourself an out by keeping space in front of you and not tailgating, somebody will cut in. Somebody will cut in front of you, and you lose your space. And so, you know, a lot of the education and a lot of the instruction and training we gave the guys was designed around making sure you're following these principles of Smith's system, defensive driver training. So, Kasim, we could move on. This is the DBVM piece where we've partnered closely with MIX. Obviously, again, it's focused on some of the key performance indicators that we see around speeding, harsh acceleration, harsh deceleration, seatbelt usage, using lights at nighttime, and excessive idling. And each driver has a dedicated key, blue key, in addition to the ignition key, that has to be plugged in order to start the vehicle engine. So we can track the driver as opposed to tracking just the vehicle. So this element of the technology, integrating this into our program, has been absolutely fundamental, and it gives us this view of our data that really is incredibly valuable insights into how our drivers are performing. And as Brody said, you know, you can set your criteria based on, you know, needs improvement, not acceptable, good, very good, you know, and you can see that on the right-hand side of the chart. It also provides us with invaluable information in terms of incident investigations. So time and again, you'll have an incident, you'll have an investigation, and you interview a driver, and the driver will say, I wasn't speeding. And without having, you know, police reports that can actually accurately calculate stopping distances from skid marks and other such evidence on the road, it's almost impossible, right? So having this data tells us very clearly, you know, actually you were speeding before we know you were speeding and you weren't wearing your seatbelt, or you know, you were driving consistently for the last 20 minutes before you had this accident. You were driving literally right at the speed limit, and so it gives us a really strong insight into helping us do root cause analysis. So next slide, Kasim. The unannounced road audits piece for us was just part of how do we, you know, proactively, while the guys are in the field, because in certain markets like Egypt, we're not allowed to use the GPS functionality in the system because it's that the government don't allow it. So it's after the fact that we see a lot of the data coming from Egypt, for example. So in Egypt specifically, we engaged a third party to do these road audits for us. And they monitor a number of things, not only road safety, but also, are the drivers well presented? Are they wearing the PepsiCo uniforms? How are they handling the product? Because in the case of our snacks products, we want to make sure the, you know, chips are not damaged and broken before the consumer gets them. So all of these elements, driver evaluation plus handling plus a vehicle evaluation, leads to our overall score, and this is reported as part of their overall performance as well. We can go to the next slide, Kasim. This, as I mentioned earlier, the road complaints numbers. So this is a third-party company that manages and maintains the vehicle complaints for us, and we get a lot of calls. We get a lot of calls about public expressing concern about driving behaviors, about vehicles parked incorrectly. And we get that daily report, and violations are monthly recorded and investigated, and then that becomes part of the driver's performance assessment. Next slide. The performance piece is fundamental for us, and this is really where we've had a big impact in changing driver behavior and monitoring their helping them improve their performance. So we basically rate number of violations per 1,000 kilometers driven, and you can see first-degree violations and second-degree violations. First-degree violations are things that we think are completely, totally unacceptable, whereas second-degree violations are still serious but less of a concern. So, Kasim, we can move on. So what we do is we take that data and link it to their commission. right? So all of our drivers are our sales reps effectively, and they all make commission on the basis of what they sell. And what we did is we can't impact their base salary, that's legally protected, but commission is over and above. So what we do is for those drivers that are driving in an excellent manner, consistently through the data we get from the black boxes, we're giving them a 15% on top of their commission, right? 15% over commission. Their first time round. Their second time round, they can get up to 20%. So for good behaviors, it's 10 and 15. For fair behaviors, it's nothing. It's 0. And for those guys who are driving with significant violations, there's a progressively more severe deduction of their commission, right? So this, I have to say, when you look at our injury stats, you can almost see to the day when we launched and deployed this reward and penalization scheme. That's when we started seeing our free collision rates drop off and significant incidents and other accidents starting to drop off in this market. This had a direct impact, and without having the technology on board, we'd never have this level of insight. You can move, Kasim. Behind the wheel coaching program is another fundamental part of this. Nobody learns how to drive safely sitting in a classroom or sitting behind an e-learning module. The only way you can effectively learn and teach people new behaviors and new practices, best practices, is get out on the road behind the wheel with these drivers. And that's what we do with our Smith system. We have certified behind the wheel coaches who have been drivers for us in the past, and now their full-time job is no longer selling product for us, but it's to go out and coach our drivers and deliver this training for them every year. Okay. Next slide, Kasim. And then the overall outcome, last slide for me, the overall outcome in this is we've improved our collision frequency rate by, it's over 40% now. We've had a savings in our freight repair cost by 30%, which is a significant productivity gain for us. Reduced total loss accident cost by 80%, again, significant productivity gained in that regard. We've reduced the number of driver violations by 54% since we rolled this program out in 2012. So significant reduction in the violations. The percent of drivers penalized has reduced by 35%, while the number of drivers rewarded has improved by 72%. So the drivers view this as a way of making additional commission over and above their base, and that's been one of our big breakthroughs in terms of modifying their behaviors. And over time now we're beginning to see a fundamental shift in how our businesses and our drivers are viewing road safety. That is becoming fundamental for them. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Cormac. And last but not least, I'll hand it over to Ashok.
Thank you, Kasim. Good afternoon, all of you. Good morning, wherever you are from. Just let me quickly say, I think it was good the way it started off. We know what technology can deliver, and we heard also from Cormac how that technology has been used to implement safety and bring in good driver behavior as well as improve the performance of the company. I think what I will do is probably extend that a little bit with few more examples and how it has been done in Shell. If you move to the second slide, Kasim. Thank you. Quickly to say that whatever we are trying to do using the technology, we are actually doing around the world. It is not in a specific country or something, and we divide world essentially Americas, which you see on the left-hand side, Europe, which is on the top. If it doesn't fit in those two, it comes in the rest of the world, or I call it nicely East, and I think we cover that portion. And those Shell emblems that you are seeing is probably the countries where I am responsible for, and we have some of the examples later on you will see in the presentation are picked up from these countries. Next slide, please, Kasim. Okay, we will quickly run through why safety, and I'm sure we must, I'm assuming in the audience we have safety professionals, we also have some business people, and transport or logistic industry is always very sensitive to the bottom line. So let's try and address probably the why safety to both the audience, and then we will try and look at what those safety parameters that have been used to make that improvement, what are those efficiency we have achieved, and how is affecting the business overall. We will have a look at it. Next slide, please. Now this one is a very straightforward one to say. I mean, those who are already safety professionals, it is like preaching to those who are already converted. So you know what it is for, but we say. But let's be very clear, it is both proven by actual industry experience as well as researched heavily and documented that when you have motivated staff, the productivity will automatically increase. And I can vouch for it. We have seen the worst days and we have seen the best days. So before going ahead, let me quickly say 2015, you must be hearing a lot of good this about safety. Shell talking about this was the first year in 100 plus years of our experience in Shell worldwide, we had 0 fatal incident recordable, which means we caused it. If someone comes and bangs us from behind and there is a fatality, we don't, as long as we have done everything right, we won't count it, but we have not contributed to any incident, and that was 2015 was the first year where we recorded 0. Now that is only possible if you have real committed staff and leadership. So the motivated staff is extremely important to achieve that. Now, obviously, once you convince the drivers what is good for them, you will not see turnover. Otherwise, the driver industry is such that even if they get 1% more salary, they would jump out onto the particularly in the difficult countries or developing countries where they are not looked at. There is no job dignity. So they run for money, and it is important to hold on to those whom we have trained and work that. So that's the biggest advantage one can think of why you have go for the good safety. Of course, the improved efficiency and thereby the customers automatically start seeing improved service. Then there will, those of you who talk of the corporate social responsibility, there is a reduced carbon emission, reduced turnover from this, and you can always say what all we are contributing to the greener environment. If you just click once or twice more, Kasim, on this slide. But when it comes to Shell, the real important thing for us, we know all those benefits are coming, but we really started off the safety journey by saying every employee who comes, every person who comes to work for Shell goes home safely the same way as he has come or she has come. Now that was the biggest advantage where we started off with the safety, but then it became into business benefits. If you move to the next slide, Kasim. I think it was very nicely covered both by Brody as well as Cormac on what IVMS is capable of and onboard technology or whatever, in-vehicle monitoring system, onboard computer. This is known by many names, but essentially we are talking of the same system. Now, why is that important? To me, for two main reasons why you need something like this. Before IVMS, I was a transport manager way back in 1980s. We still had same targets and we were struggling to achieve them simply because the driver, when he comes back and he is telling you, he says, oh, that supervisor doesn't like me. He will always put me down. Now, impossible to solve such problems unless you are really working face to face. And how can you do in a company where you have got 500 vehicles and 1,200 drivers? You just won't be able to do it. But think of a system which impartially records all the things that you are doing and then churns out the report. Now there is no, you have automatically eliminated that human interference where this person is intentionally calling me down, or so-and-so is naming me bad, or so-and-so is appreciating him, taken away. This is an absolute impartial assessment, number one. Number two, the drivers, as long as they are within your complex, within your compound, you can watch them, you can monitor them, and you know that, yes, this is happening as you want it. Once they are out of the gate, they are the kings while on the road. How will you know whether it is really happening or not? And this is where I think technology helps maximum. So the advantage in this is we are confident that we are getting the right and reliable information. And the drivers also now know that it is impartial and they cannot hide under something. It will come out and they come to us. That's biggest advantage of the IVMS for me. Now, whether you are a safety professional or a business who is looking after the bottom line, there are innumerable advantages when you use technology. Now, there were some 7 or 8 items put up initially in Brody's presentation. Some of them were picked up by Cormac later on saying what are they used. In Shell, I think we have gone through all this, driver, the recruitment, in terms of training, all those things have happened. In fact, in our case, the driver to be on his solo drive, it takes almost 3 months. Until then, he is with somebody, getting trained, being washed, behind the wall. Everything that Cormac said would definitely go through. Yeah, we need about 3 months only because we are handling dangerous products, petrol, diesel behind. So we want to make sure that when we put somebody on the road, he or she is indeed really the right person to be on the road. Take. Now let's look at what the driver safety behavior and how can you read. The biggest advantage you can achieve safety-wise is by looking at the harsh acceleration and braking. Every time you brake harsh could have been an incident. We call that potential incident. So every harsh braking, if you count as a potential incident, automatically you will start eliminating them and that contributes to your safety. Now once the safety is up and people are motivated, rest of the things fall in very easily. Now I have listed a lot of items here, but I wouldn't go through all of them. But definitely once you reduce harsh acceleration, you will save fuel, maintenance cost will come down, breakdowns will reduce, customer service will be happy, and there will be compliments coming upon. There are many other things depending on which country it is or which area we use, like no night driving. Yes, you can verify and make sure if that is happening. Geofencing, particularly when we use it for efficiency, because when the vehicle gets into the terminal and might comes out, we want to make sure it has done within 20 minutes. So, or when it goes to a filling station to deliver, we want to see that it comes back within 40 minutes. So those of you who are business or the managers looking at the bottom line, please be aware the IVMS gives more benefits for the bottom line than safety. We may think it as a safety equipment, but it really adds a lot to the bottom line. Next slide, please, Colin. So what are the 4 things that we looked at? As I said, the latest IVMS, if can have a recorded camera and all, as many as 36, 40 different parameters can be monitored. Now, all nice to do, but if we can do 3, 4, 5, it will achieve probably the 70, 80% benefit one can look for. So in Shell, we went in for the speeding, harsh acceleration, harsh deceleration, and driving hours. The driving hours was essentially because of the fatigue part of it, and we wanted to make sure that nobody goes beyond certain number of hours in driving, irrespective of whether he will be able to deliver or not. So those were the 4 items that were put in. Now, the OGP 365, which Brody referred to, can be used, but we have gone probably in some cases beyond that by decreasing further just to improve the safety part of it. These are some of the monitoring parameters that we did. Can we jump on to the next one? Kasim? Yeah. Now, from here on, I have got 7 or 8 slides to show what are those advantages that one can achieve. Now, this one is clearly those 4 parameters that we were talking about, which is speeding, harsh acceleration, braking, and driver working hours. And this is in an African country, recorded over a period of 2 years. I mean, of course, there is a further record also available. But if you see in the time when we introduced IVMS in this country, within a period of 6 months, we had as many as 11,500 plus violations. But once you start them and start giving feedback to the drivers and put them through, by the time you reach today, we are talking of 100 against 11,500 violations. Now, what it essentially means, it has become a safer place. Drivers are happy because you're making sure that they are coming and their families are happy and they don't want drivers to leave and go anywhere else. And not only this, you all definitely need to follow the IVMS report with some system like what Cormac was referring to, whether you call it a safety bonus or you call it commission. But if you can put that in, I think it is a winning formula. It helps benefit business as well as the driver, and he is happy because he is doing well, and he thinks that he is getting motivated by doing the right thing, at the same time getting higher salary or commission, bonus, whatever you call. We in Shell would call it safety bonus, and we add that on. Next slide, please. Now, this is again another country. The box that you see them is really number of drivers and vehicles involved and the millions of kilometers data this covers. You can see this is nothing but number of incidents per million kilometers in that particular case. I would just jump on to a few more slides like discussing next one. This is the severity of accident represented. I mean, you can see obviously this comes from pounds, which means this is from one of the UK haulier who works for Shell. And they do have a sort of running insurance over a period. You can see how the premium is coming down. That is how you see the insurance claim has reduced, which means severity of the incidents have gone down. Next slide, please. Now, we have as many as 11 or 12 different countries. After putting just by putting IVMS, you will not get the benefit. Let me be clear in that. You need to also give regular feedback to the drivers, and probably in some cases bring people from the OEMs to train the drivers, like Scania, MAN. You take any of the European brand, they are more than willing to come and help. In case of India, the local manufacturers, Tata and Leyland, have come and worked with drivers, train them. As many as 9 countries have given more than 5% savings on the fuel, just by giving this training and giving them the feedback from what has been observed on the driving habit, driving pattern, which has been collected from the IVMS. Next slide, please. Now, this is, I can very much say, very much example of one of the Middle East countries collected over a period, and this is how the maintenance cost has gone down. Now, this is itself is a big subject. One can talk a few hours on this subject. How come you can achieve this? And that is exactly when you eliminate harsh brake and harsh acceleration, I think you are making a big improvement in the utilization of the vehicle as well as its maintenance, engine parts, wear and tear. That's where it contributes to. Next slide, please. Now, this is a classic. I think Brody was earlier mentioning in his part that what he was saying was essentially the fleet management can also be covered in the technology. Now, although we are concentrating, we started off initially more as a safety equipment. We started utilizing it later on as the time progressed. And we have found out that when you do the right level of maintenance at the right time, and this information can be automatically taken out, one doesn't have to follow, that helps you in improved performance and reduced breakdowns of the vehicle on the road. Next slide, please. Obviously, the vehicle breakdowns are reducing, means you are delivering on time, you will have a satisfied customer, and we in Shell, we normally check every delivery that goes, and I think we are talking about 50,000 plus delivery each day. In only my part of the region. If we add the whole world, it will be much more. Every depot is to actually monitor and report the timely performance. How we agree with the customer saying we are coming at this time, plus minus 15 minutes of that time is considered as acceptable within range, so you get 100%. But if you are 16 minutes late or 16 minutes earlier, which is 1 minute earlier than the agreed time, then you are not in the delivery performance. This is monitored, and such information is also obtained not by someone writing the time or date, but from the system, which is IVMS, because you have geofenced the area, you know what time you entered, and you can compare with what you did and get out. Next one, please. And I think this is the last one up for my presentation, and this is a classic case of saying, what do you see? See, safety as well as delivery business is what I call is like hygiene. Nobody would jump in the morning and stand up and say, hey, I'm very well today, I'm happy. No. Whereas even a mild headache, one would get up and say, oh, I'm having headache. So you are tested most of the time only when you have an issue. Similarly, the customer feedback rarely will be good feedback. Customer feedback most of the time is complaint, you know, what they didn't like or what they said. But in a setup like this, we compare what we got as complaints versus the customer feedback is a classic case to say something has changed in the system which makes the customers happy and they are willing to give the feedback. And this is the classic case. And I feel the system of using the onboard technology effectively, both collecting the data, giving right feedback to the drivers, as well as utilizing it for the business benefit will give a fantastic results when done. Its safety, its benefit, economic benefits, all those things are written up. Kasim, that's back to you.
Thank you, Ashok, and thank you everybody for very.
Hi, Kasim.
Yes, Ashok. So
Yeah,
what we're going
thank
to
you.
do now is open it up to any questions from the audience. If you do have a question, you can either raise your hand and I will open up your audio so you can ask the presenters, or you can type it out in the chat or in the questions. Or if there are any questions between the presenters themselves, we will open up the last 10 minutes for a Q&A session. I think you guys explained it so well that nobody has any questions.
Yeah, but let me quickly ask a question to Cormac then. Cormac, Ashok here. Is Smith system common across all the area or on certain region or certain countries only you have gone for it?
Yeah, we've gone for it in the higher risk regions, the higher risk countries. So specifically for us, that is Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, for our snacks business in the United Arab Emirates. And we have a slightly modified version for developed markets like Australia, China, and in other countries across Asia, we've got a third-party distribution model. So when you go to Thailand, Vietnam, China, India, our distribution in those countries is outsourced to a third party. Now we do push them to do defensive driver training and behind the wheel driver training, but that's one of our opportunity areas, is to really try and engage them more directly on doing more in that space. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if there are no questions from anybody, I want to thank everybody for their time in this informative session. It was definitely a good session where we learned how IVMS can contribute to both safety and efficiency. I think there's one question. No, I think didn't write that out. But again, thank you everybody. What I will do is this session has been recorded, so I will make it available online, and everybody will get an email with a link to where they can go and listen to this webinar again if they wish. And if you or anybody has any further questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. I believe my information is available in the webinar request that you received. So again, if there are no more questions, I want to thank everybody again, and we look forward to meeting again in future such webinars so we can make sure that, that we're increasing road safety throughout the world rather than in one specific country. So thank you again, everybody.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
also. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.